I had always been independent, even after my husband passed away years ago. I still lived in the same house where we raised our son, Daniel. When he and his wife, Lisa, suggested that I move in with them for extra care, I didn't hesitate. I thought I was lucky to have a son who cared so much. At first, everything seemed fine. Lisa would prepare my meals, and Daniel handled my doctor's appointments. They reminded me to take my medication and even helped me with bills and groceries. I was grateful. But then, things changed. I started feeling off. Forgetfulness, sluggishness, moments of confusion. At first, I thought it was just old age creeping up on me. But it wasn't just little things, misplacing my glasses or forgetting where I left my keys. No, it was much worse. One day, I went to the kitchen and completely blanked on why I was there. Another time, I found myself staring at a calendar, unable to remember what month it was. Conversations would blur together, and sometimes, I couldn't even finish my own sentences. It scared me. And Daniel and Lisa only made it worse. They reassured me that it was normal for someone my age. They'd exchange worried looks when I forgot things, speaking in hushed tones just loud enough for me to hear. "She's slipping," Lisa whispered to Daniel one evening when she thought I was asleep. "We should start looking at options before it gets worse." "Let's not rush," Daniel said, but there was something hesitant in his voice. "We'll wait until the doctor confirms it." "Confirms what?" A shiver ran down my spine, but I pushed my worries aside. They were just concerned. They loved me. Didn't they? I didn't know it then, but my nightmare was just beginning. The more I tried to ignore the signs, the worse they became. My mind, once sharp and dependable, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I would wake up feeling exhausted despite having slept all night. Some mornings, my hands would shake so badly I could barely hold a cup of tea. I forgot conversations that had happened just hours before. And Lisa and Daniel? They only seemed to reinforce the idea that it was all just me. "You've already asked me that, Mom," Daniel would say when I repeated a question. Lisa sighed when I misplaced my reading glasses for the third time in a day. "Maybe we should set reminders for things like this," she suggested. "Or get one of those elderly alert bracelets." They were patient, but there was something too patient about the way they handled me. It felt rehearsed. The worst part was the doctor's visits. Daniel always insisted on taking me himself, scheduling the appointments without asking, and staying in the room whenever I spoke to the doctor. I noticed how he would answer questions before I could, subtly shaping the narrative. "She's been having memory issues," he told the doctor. "Forgetting important things. Sometimes, she even gets confused about what day it is." I sat there, stunned. Yes, I had been having those issues, but wasn't that why I was here? To tell the doctor myself? Still, the doctor nodded, scribbled notes, and suggested possible early signs of dementia. Daniel asked all the right questions about long-term care, medication, and next steps. I felt like I was disappearing in that room, like I was nothing more than a case file to be discussed. At home, Lisa started managing my medication for me. "I'll set them out each morning," she said sweetly. "That way, you don't have to worry about it." I should have felt relief. Instead, a strange unease settled deep in my bones. Because no matter how many pills I took, I only felt worse. One evening, I sat at the dinner table, staring at my plate, unable to focus on what was in front of me. My head swam, my thoughts foggy. I knew I had taken my pills that morning. Lisa had given them to me herself. But as I sat there, unable to string a proper sentence together, one thought rang loud and clear. Something is very, very wrong. The decline felt sudden, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized it had been creeping in for months. I would reach for words that used to come easily, only to find them slipping through my grasp like mist. I would stand in a room, confused about why I was there. My hands trembled when I tried to button my shirt. And the worst part? Lisa and Daniel noticed, and they never let me forget it. Lisa would exchange worried glances with Daniel when I struggled to complete a sentence. Daniel would sigh and pat my shoulder, his tone laced with forced patience. "It's okay, Mom. These things happen." But it wasn't just their words, it was their actions. I started noticing little things. Important documents weren't where I had left them. My bank statements, which I used to check religiously, were suddenly being handled by Daniel. Just to make things easier for you, he explained. The spare keys to my house? Gone. Then came the casual conversations, little remarks that felt innocent on the surface but carried a darker weight underneath. I read an article about a great retirement home the other day, Lisa mentioned over dinner, stirring her soup. Someplace where seniors can get professional care before things get too overwhelming. Daniel nodded. That's true, Mom. A place where you wouldn't have to stress about daily life. No bills, no house maintenance, just relaxation. I tried to laugh it off. I'm fine right here. But Lisa's expression didn't change. For now. A chill crawled down my spine. And then came the final straw. One evening, after Daniel and Lisa had gone out, I went to take my nightly medication. I reached for the pill bottle Lisa had been managing for me, my fingers trembling as I turned it over. That's when I noticed something strange. The label had been tampered with, peeled back slightly and reattached. My name was still there, but when I ran my finger along the seam, I felt the uneven texture of something underneath. A sinking feeling filled my stomach. I grabbed my reading glasses, peeled the label back further, and my breath caught in my throat. The original prescription name was different. I wasn't taking what I had been prescribed. Lisa and Daniel had been giving me something else entirely. Panic surged through me as I stared at the altered prescription label. My mind raced with possibilities, but one thought was louder than the rest: they were drugging me. I couldn't prove it yet, but deep down, I knew. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I called my old friend Margaret. We had been neighbors for decades before she moved in with her daughter across town. I hadn't seen her in months, but something told me I needed someone I could trust. When she arrived, I was sitting on the porch, feeling weaker than ever. The moment Margaret saw me, her face fell. "Oh, honey. What happened to you?" she asked, reaching for my hands. "What do you mean?" I asked, frowning. She squeezed my fingers, her eyes scanning my face. "You look different, your hands are shaking, your skin looks pale, and your voice, it's softer, almost slurred." I felt a lump form in my throat. I don't know. I've been feeling off lately. Forgetting things. Tired all the time. Margaret's expression darkened. "This isn't you. Just a few months ago, you were sharper than me. Something's wrong." Hearing those words from someone who had known me for years sent a wave of dread crashing over me. I had chalked up my symptoms to stress, grief, and maybe even aging, but Margaret's reaction made it clear. This wasn't natural. "Are you still taking your medication?" she asked suddenly. I hesitated. "Yes, but I think Lisa and Daniel changed something." Margaret's eyes widened. "Changed something? How?" I took a deep breath and told her everything: the misplaced documents, the sudden talk of retirement homes, the way Daniel insisted on handling my finances, and most of all, the altered medication label. Margaret listened in stunned silence before shaking her head. "This doesn't sit right with me. If they're drugging you, this is beyond betrayal. This is criminal." My stomach twisted. But why? Why would my own son do this? Margaret exhaled slowly. "Money, control, there could be a lot of reasons. But you need to stop taking those pills immediately." I nodded, determination replacing my fear. "I already did." She squeezed my hands. "Good. Now, we figure out what they're giving you. And then, we find out just how far they've gone." For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than fear. I felt ready. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Margaret's visit had confirmed my worst fears. I wasn't just imagining things. Something was being done to me. But I couldn't act on emotions alone. If I confronted them without proof, they would turn it around on me, calling me paranoid or confused. No, I needed something solid. The first step was simple: I had to stop taking their pills. For the next few days, I pretended to take the medication as usual. Each morning, I placed the pill in my mouth, sipped my water, and swallowed. At least, that's what it looked like. The moment they left the room, I spat the pill into a tissue and hid it in my robe pocket. It didn't take long to feel the difference. By the third day, my head was clearer. My hands weren't shaking as much. The exhaustion that had clung to me like a heavy blanket started to lift. My memory sharpened, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. That's when I knew for certain they were drugging me. But what exactly had they been giving me? Margaret had already offered to help, so I called her again. We met at a small cafe downtown, somewhere I knew Lisa and Daniel wouldn't be lurking. I pulled out the crumpled tissue from my pocket and placed the tiny, white pills on the table. I need to know what these are. Margaret's expression hardened. I have a friend who works in a pharmacy. Let me take these to her. I nodded. And there's something else. I want to set up a camera in my bedroom. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. You think they're tampering with more than your medication? I don't know, I admitted. But I need to see what's happening when I'm not looking. Margaret squeezed my hand. I'll get you a camera. A small one. Later that evening, she handed me a discreet, motion-activated camera, something small enough to blend in with the room. That night, when Lisa and Daniel were watching TV downstairs, I installed it on the bookshelf facing my nightstand. Then, I waited. Days passed, and my body continued to recover. My mind sharpened. My energy returned. But I kept pretending, acting weak, confused, forgetful. I had to make them believe their plan was still working. Then, on the fifth night, I checked the camera footage. And what I saw made my blood run cold. My hands trembled as I clicked play on the footage. The small screen on my laptop flickered to life, showing a grainy but clear recording of my bedroom. I fast-forwarded through hours of me sleeping, the room still and undisturbed, until I saw movement. At 2:14 a.m., the bedroom door creaked open. Lisa stepped in first, wearing her nightgown, her face set in eerie calmness. Behind her, Daniel followed, holding something in his hand. I watched in horror as they approached my nightstand. Lisa picked up my pill bottle, opened it, and poured out a dose into her palm. Daniel then took out a different bottle from his pocket, one I had never seen before. He replaced my real medication with whatever he had brought, then put the original label back on the bottle. Lisa whispered something to him, too soft to catch on the recording. Daniel just nodded. They stood there for a moment, watching me, making sure I was still asleep. Then, as quietly as they had entered, they slipped back out. My stomach twisted. They were drugging me. And not just once, they were maintaining a steady cycle to ensure I remained weak and disoriented. I sat in silence, my pulse pounding in my ears. This wasn't just greed. This was premeditated, planned with precision. The medication was likely meant to make me seem incompetent so they could take control of my assets. Then another thought hit me like a sledgehammer. Had they done this to my husband before he passed? Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced myself to breathe. I couldn't afford to break down. Not yet. A sudden buzz startled me. It was Margaret. Her message was short, "Call me." I got the results. I dialed her number immediately. She answered on the first ring. "It's worse than we thought," she said grimly. "The pills contain traces of an antipsychotic drug, one that can cause confusion, dizziness, and memory loss when given to someone who doesn't need it. Long-term use can mimic symptoms of dementia." I closed my eyes, my grip tightening on the phone. So that was their game. Margaret's voice softened. "What are you going to do?" I opened my eyes, my resolve hardening. I'm going to make them think they've won. Because the next move was mine. I spent the next few days pretending nothing had changed. I took the fake medication in front of Daniel and Lisa, letting them believe I was still their helpless, confused target. But in reality, I flushed the pills when they weren't looking. Slowly, my mind cleared even further. I no longer woke up groggy. My thoughts were sharper. The fog they had placed over me was lifting, and with it, my patience for their scheme was running out. But I had to be careful. If they realized I knew the truth too soon, there was no telling what they might do. So, I played my part. I let Lisa guide me around the house as if I were some feeble old woman. I let Daniel talk over me when making financial decisions, nodding blankly as if I didn't understand. And I made sure to slip in moments of confusion, little acts that would make them believe their plan was working perfectly. Then, one evening, I set my trap. At dinner, I looked at Lisa and sighed. "You know," I murmured, rubbing my temples, "I think you might be right. Maybe I do need more help." Lisa's eyes lit up, but she forced herself to look concerned. "Oh, Mum, we just want what's best for you." Daniel leaned in, trying to mask his eagerness. "What are you thinking, Mum?" I exhaled deeply, feigning exhaustion. "Maybe it's time I consider the retirement home." Lisa gasped, covering her mouth in fake shock. "Oh, sweetheart, are you sure?" she asked Daniel, barely able to contain her delight. I nodded. "But I want to get my affairs in order first. I think it's time we have a lawyer finalize everything, especially my will." Daniel and Lisa exchanged a quick, telling glance. That was all I needed. 2 days later, they brought in a lawyer, a man they had clearly prearranged, someone who would ensure everything was signed in their favor. But they didn't know that I had already contacted my lawyer. As the documents were placed before me, I feigned confusion, blinking slowly as if struggling to understand. Daniel helpfully pointed to the spots where I needed to sign, his smile tight, eager. I picked up the pen, hesitating just long enough to make them nervous. Then I said, "Actually, before I sign, I'd like you both to read something first." Lisa frowned. "What?" I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out an envelope. "It's from my lawyer." Daniel stiffened. "Your lawyer?" I slid the letter across the table. "Go on. Open it." Lisa hesitated before tearing the envelope open. Her eyes scanned the paper, and then she went pale. Daniel grabbed it from her hands. The moment he read it, his face contorted in panic. "What the hell is this?" I smiled coldly. "It's my real will," I said. "The one I changed the moment I discovered what you were doing to me." Daniel's hand shook. "Mum, I don't know what you're talking about." Lisa let out a nervous laugh. "Sweetheart, you must be confused. Maybe you need to rest." I cut her off. "I know about the pills." Dead silence. Lisa's lips parted, but no words came out. Daniel's eyes darted around the room as if looking for a way out. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "I have video evidence. I have medical proof. I have everything I need to put you both exactly where you belong." Lisa dropped the letter onto the table. Her hands were shaking. You don't understand," she stammered. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said coldly. "I understand that you were drugging me to make me seem senile. I understand that you were trying to take my home, my money, everything I worked my whole life for. And I understand that the only reason you kept me alive this long was to make sure all the paperwork was in place." Daniel's face turned red. "Mum, listen, No, you listen," I interrupted. "I have already contacted the police. They'll be here soon. And when they go through my medical records, my finances, and the footage of you sneaking into my room to switch my medication, they will have more than enough to charge you both." Lisa stood abruptly. "You wouldn't do that to your own son." I met her gaze without hesitation. "You're not my son anymore." A knock on the door echoed through the room. Right on time. Lisa and Daniel froze as the knock echoed through the house. I could see the panic flicker in their eyes, their carefully crafted scheme crumbling in real time. Lisa's fingers clenched around the edge of the table. "You didn't actually call the police," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're bluffing." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "Go ahead," I said. "Open the door and find out." Daniel shot me a look of pure hatred before storming toward the door. His movements were stiff, shoulders hunched, like a trapped animal about to lash out. Lisa stayed rooted in place, her breathing quick and uneven. The door creaked open, and the low murmur of voices filled the air. Then I heard it. "Daniel Whitmore? Lisa Whitmore? We need you to come with us." A sharp intake of breath. The shuffle of feet. And then the cold, unmistakable clink of handcuffs. Lisa let out a choked gasp as two officers stepped inside. One officer turned to me, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you okay?" For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. "I am now," I said. Lisa started screaming, her voice shrill and desperate. "You can't do this." "She's confused. She's old. She doesn't know what she's saying." Daniel, on the other hand, didn't say a word. His silence was louder than any denial. He knew it was over. One of the officers turned to me. "We reviewed the evidence you submitted. The medication tampering alone is a serious offense, and with the financial manipulation, well, they have a lot to answer for." Lisa thrashed as they led her toward the door. "After everything we did for you," she shrieked. "You owe us." I stared at her, my face void of emotion. "No, Lisa," I said quietly. "You owed me respect, loyalty, family. And you threw it all away." Her face twisted in rage, but before she could spew another word, the officers hauled her outside. Daniel followed, stiff and defeated, his head hung low. The door shut behind them, leaving behind nothing but silence. I let out a long breath, my body sagging into the chair. The house felt lighter, freer. I wasn't alone for long. A few minutes later, my lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, arrived, his usual calm expression tinged with approval. "I see things went as expected," he said, setting his briefcase down. I nodded. "It's over." He smiled. "Not just yet. There's still the matter of your will." I exhaled sharply. The thought of Daniel inheriting everything used to bring me comfort, knowing the family's legacy would continue through him. But now? He would get nothing. I pulled out the documents I had prepared and slid them across the table. "I want my estate to go to people who actually care," I said firmly. "Charities that support the elderly. Maybe a scholarship fund for kids who never had family to rely on." Mr. Reynolds nodded approvingly. "A fine choice." As he finalized the paperwork, I let my eyes wander around the home I had built. The memories I had fought to protect. The life I had reclaimed. For so long, I had been made to feel powerless. But now, as I sat in the quiet, with justice finally served, I realized the truth. I wasn't weak. I wasn't helpless. I was free.